not only do we want to provide a better user experience, both for new users and also for existing users, but we really shouldn't be replicating the power structures of Web 2 and Web 3.
What we'd like to do is really make a friendly space for users who are ready to jump into the world of like dApps and self-custody. So this is an idea that we just come back to again and again and again, is like, how can we create a place that feels Web3 native that's also super cozy?
Hi everyone, it's Jordan from the NEWFORUM team. On today's episode, we're very happy to have Matt Luongo and Michael Haley, founder and head of product of Tallyho, the wallet Web3 deserves. So if you're interested in security and user experience when it comes to Web3 wallets, then you're in the right place. So Matt and Michael, welcome to NEWFORUM.
Awesome, thanks for having us.
So first question for both of you, and we'll start with Matt, is how did you discover Web3 and what has kept you in the space to this point?
Sure. Well, Web3 is an evolution of something that I think we've been working on in our space for years. So I guess how I first got into, at the time it was just Bitcoin, was that I started a business buying and selling Starbucks gift cards way back in the day. This was back in 2013. And it was doing fairly well. It turns out that there's this entire secondary gift card industry almost at this point. But I got deplatformed. PayPal shut me down because they considered gift cards to be gray finance. And so I knew very little about economics at all. I just knew I wanted to make money and I saw an opportunity. And so that's actually what led me to find Bitcoin, was sort of like an early bad PayPal experience. So since then, Web3, this was pre-Ethereum. The idea really didn't exist. But since then, I've been involved with a number of projects in the space through our studio thesis. And I'd say Web3 is like the latest vision of a world where you own your money, you own your property, you own your speech. And instead of relying on the government or people's goodwill, these things are actually protected by math.
Oh, that's good. And Michael, what about you? How did you get into Web3?
Yeah, I think it was like the middle of 2014. I heard about, Bitcoin for the first time from a friend from college who I hadn't seen in years, who many folks at that time were primarily using Bitcoin to do transactions on the dark web. And shortly after that, then I started reading about just how Bitcoin mining worked and all these data centers people had in Iceland that were sort of, I guess they wanted to have them out in Iceland because you don't have to pay as much for temperature control. You just kind of let the Arctic breezes in. But this was just totally mind blowing to me. So I was maybe like primed to be really interested or go down the rabbit hole because I'd been really interested in, I guess, just as an undergrad in sort of the anthropology of money. My undergrad advisor is pretty well-known like Marxist theorist. Michael Hart. He wrote a book with someone who is still not allowed back in Italy for sort of radical politics in the 70s and their association with the Red Brigades. Antonio Negri, who's definitely worth a Googling trip. But Michael and Tony had done a lot of work on like, okay, basically how can we think about class warfare in the sort of like postmodern age, right? And they had a book called Multitude that is this very arcane theory book that like went on to become like a million seller in the wake of the WTO protests in like the early aughts. So anyway, I was really interested in money, and it was like mind blowing to me that like, holy shit, there's a new kind of money that some people are making and people actually think it has value. I thought money, okay, we're going to have, fiat money by the state, and that's just like the way finance is going to work forever. So the idea that like there was a whole design space around here that was suddenly opened up was just totally mind blowing to me. Right around the same time, I started to get into Bitcoin. Early, Ethereum was being floated around as an idea. So Joe Lubin and a lot of the early consensus folks before consensus existed started appearing at Bitcoin meetups and NYC. And like as cool as Bitcoin was, Ethereum, even in pre-launch form, was just super exciting. I was applying to law school at the time. Thankfully, that's a path I didn't take, and was basically working as an analyst at like a white collar criminal defense firm. And we had a lot of like Wall Street clients, and we're going through trades gone wrong at places like Goldman, and just seeing like, oh, wow, yeah, smart contracts would make a lot of this a lot more transparent and then just a lot easier. So I don't know, I was kind of double primed for Bitcoin and Ethereum, and here I am years later.
Oh, that's a great intro, and I look forward to the follow-up questions after Talio, when we're going to dive a bit more into why people think such a thing has a value, a token. But when talking about value, obviously, one thing that definitely has value is security. And Tallyho highlights or presents itself as the wallet Web3 deserves. So I was wondering, Matt, can you present the vision of Tallyho? Like, what is Tallyho? And what are the big lines of what you're trying to do?
There are a couple of big ideas that are coming together and led to us starting Tallyho. So the first is, I've watched wallets for years in this space. I started dabbling in 2013 and kind of made it my full-time thing in 2014. For years, there have been issues about like, what is the purpose of a wallet? What's a business model? Is there a business model? Does this make sense? And over the years, we've seen people take multiple shots on goal. We saw Bread Wallet with their early tokenization efforts back in like 2017. We're now seeing what I think is kind of like the new browser wars, right? We're seeing this competition between MetaMask and Phantom and Coinbase Wallet that we're entering right now. The important idea here around security is, what is it exactly that we're doing here? So are we trying to help people own their own money, their own NFTs? Are we trying to, like, what is the purpose of a wallet? And I would argue as an engineer first, and maybe an ideologue, that the purpose of the wallet is to make sure that you know exactly what you're signing. If you don't know what you're signing, you don't own your own money, you don't own your own speech. Anyone could convince you to sign off on anything. And in fact, they do often. That we see scams related to poor wallet UX all the time. We call them phishing, and we pretend like it's not the wallet's fault. And maybe like in a legal sense, sure, it's not the wallet's fault, but it's our job to educate users on what it is they're doing. So on the security side, what we're trying to do with Tallyho is we're trying to just make it crystal clear. What is it that you're actually doing? What are you signing? What's this process? So that means things like simplifying the idea of a network, simplifying the idea of a swap, just making it easier to understand and close to your users. But the other thing that we're doing, which I actually think long-term is even more important, is focusing on ownership. So not only do we want to provide a better user experience, both for new users and also for existing users, but we really shouldn't be replicating the power structures of Web 2 and Web 3. If JP Morgan owns your Web 3 wallet, how long do you think it's going to continue to be provided as a public good? How long do you think it's going to be aligned with you and your interests? And I'd argue that we know how this game ends, right? We've seen what's happened with traditional banking. We want to do more than that in Web3. We want to be more than just bankers shipping software and then trying to extract rent from users. So the end goal with Tallyho is to have a robust, fair launch and to make sure Web3 users actually own the platform and own the wallet.
One thing that you briefly touched upon is, in terms of the values of Tallyho, one of the things that is highlighted actually on the website is that it's 100% open source and fully owned by the community. Can you touch upon this, why it's so important for Tallyho, the concepts of 100% open source and the community owned?
The basic observation around like why this project was started was your wallet is kind of your portal to Web3, right? That's how you're accessing the decentralized internet. But most of the time, most of the wallets most users are using are not open source, and or they're controlled by like Web 2 style mega corporations. So like, what the hell are we doing here, right? So if the wallet is a total choke point for the entire ecosystem, and if you're getting involved in Web 3 because you believe in some of these values, then like, why is the thing that you're interacting with the entire ecosystem not following those values? It just doesn't make sense, right? This was bothering me, this was bothering Matt, this was bothering a lot of people who've been attracted to the project early on. And so like, we felt like we needed to be really clear and really upfront, like right when the project was started, like, okay, what are the sort of core values that we care about that are important, not only to, Tallyho, but kind of Web3 generally, right? So there are three that jumped out. And like you already touched on a couple of them. One is like open source or just full transparency of our code base. Another is full community ownership, which is something that we're targeting with an upcoming fair launch that Matt mentioned. And then the third is just like access for everyone. So earlier this year, I mean, it feels like even longer ago because it's been like an insanely long year, but I think it was in Q1. There was an issue where a couple providers like a large NFT marketplace, OpenSea, that probably some folks know, and then also Infura, a large infrastructure provider in the space, which is another consensus project that by default, all Ethereum requests on MetaMask are routed through. Basically blocked access to a bunch of different countries. Some because they're on US sanctions list, others just kind of by accident. And this is something that we were worried about for a while would happen. And so we said, okay, we need to think about ways in which like we can build a wallet that is going to be available for everyone, regardless of where you live. Open source is part of that. There's a huge security element to open source. There's a huge ownership and kind of, I don't know, like remix culture component to open source. Like we want to create code that like we don't own, that isn't encumbered, that anyone can fork, can copy, can remix, can hack on. It's not something that we own. If you have all the code, like you're actually kind of owning the code base. But there's also a huge security element to this too, right? You have like more eyes means like more review, means more security, right? I don't know. I feel like I could dive in like a ton more into any of those, but I would say there were a few things that really were triggers for us. One was, again, a bunch of users in different jurisdictions being blocked. The other, certain large exchanges and wallets are basically passing different types of user data to ICE and other federal enforcement agencies. And then the third is some wallets are just making monopoly products. Again, MetaMask is an awesome critical product early on in the history of Ethereum, but they're making something like, I don't know what it is at this point. It fluctuates up and down, but I think there was a high point of $400,000, $500,000 a day in fees from their swaps feature. And users aren't seeing any of that. So if we're talking about community ownership and users and creators being paid for the value they bring to a network or to a product, we're not seeing any of that in wallets. And so this project is really like the first attempt, I think, that I know of to really try to flip the table on that.
So then going back to the concept of community and kind of giving back to the users, Matt, can you touch upon like how the user can benefit from using Tallyho, and also touch upon the concept of the DAO that you're forming? Because obviously, when we talk community,
of course,
they go in pair, right?
Of course, yeah. So we've been pretty public about the fact that there's a planned fair launch for the token for Tallyho. To give you guys an idea of like what that actually means to users. So I'm checking today's numbers, and this might not be perfectly up to date, but I see $23 billion has gone through MetaMask swaps today. Since its inception. So the idea is that we want to go after that same opportunity, and we want to take all of those fees, and it should go back to the community. So DAOs are interesting because capital formation is interesting. Having something that's basically like an on-chain co-op, like these are really fascinating ideas. You can do a lot with them, but they need something to govern, right? And if they're just voting on, for example, what snap do we think is cool in MetaMask, that's not that interesting thing to govern, right? But if there's actual cash flow, they can point it toward things that matter to the community. They can fund public goods, or at least commons, right, that otherwise would go unfunded. So the idea so far is that all of these swap fees are going to go to the DAO. Currently, they all go to a community multisig that was brought about by folks in our Discord, but it's not civil resistance. So long term, that's not a good solution. But yeah, so I think we're currently sitting on over $100,000 in swap fees that the plan is for the community to decide where to put those. And then going forward, what we really want is we want users who are bought into the wallet and who are aligned with growing the wallet. We want the wallet to be making, it's not really revenue from a business perspective, but making money as a DAO. And then pointing that at new areas that it thinks can be improved in the ecosystem. But then the most important part is if Michael and I disappear tomorrow, that there's a robust ecosystem that continues building this wallet. That's what censorship resistance is, and that's what user ownership is.
I just realized also one point important is in terms of Tallyho, where you're at today, like what exists.
Of course.
For the general audience, so like obviously we mentioned a completely new model for wallets, but like what are the
where are we today? So as far as where we are today, the wallet works great. It's a wonderful replacement for MetaMask. We don't have mobile yet, but we do have a good extension. We have a community multisig that takes all swap fees. So the development company behind it, which is Thesis, doesn't touch swap fees. We haven't started dispersing any of that yet. I think we're figuring out what's the safest way to vote on it before the official on-chain DAO launch. And then, the last step is launching an on-chain DAO that's based roughly off Governor Bravo. And we haven't shared how that's going to be distributed, because that's, I think, probably the trickiest part about a fair launch, is making sure that you don't want insiders to have a jump. You don't want insiders who know what the code is to have a huge advantage. But you also want to make sure that you've done a good job making sure that people who are just trying to farm or whatever haven't taken over the entire token supply. And so, yeah, so that's kind of where we are. I expect that token launch will be happening next year. And then as far as the dev team, I think one of the best questions that I get is like, why? Like, why are you even doing this if there's no upside? So I think, setting money aside, there is upside in having a censorship resistant wallet in our space, and having a wallet that users own and that adds features that they care about. But also, like, we hope that the community will also vote us to be their dev team going forward, and that we will be paid for that. And if not, that's fine too. But that's kind of the goal over the next 18 months.
Got it. And obviously, one topic that you both touched upon at the beginning of the episode, and that is so central not only to wallets but to the whole space, is user experience. And I'll take a moment to talk about two very Web2 indicators, which are NPS and CS, which is Net Promoter Score and a Customer Effort Score. Obviously, in Web3, you don't have to use the word necessarily customer or user, but the main idea is that you can recommend something. For example, a wallet. I don't really want to, okay, let's take the example of MetaMask, even though I didn't really want to name it. You can really recommend a wallet because it's one of the only options, probably the best one out there. But then when it comes to the effort of the user, and so I'm not going to target MetaMask, but just talk in general, sometimes the experience is very complicated. You know you need a wallet to do a task. So you're going to install it, and it's probably the number one in recommendations, but it doesn't mean that it's easy. So question for you, Michael, going back to Tallyho, how do you navigate this concept of user experience? Like, how do you make the experience simpler for your users or your community overall?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's funny. We actually have just started tracking some of the metrics you mentioned. The response is good. I mean, there's always room for improvement, but so far so good. So one of the first things that we looked at with the wallet, it sounds trivial, but it's just like, literally, how do you navigate to view other networks? I think a lot of like more seasoned, Web3 users forget, if you want to like use Optimism or Phantom or, Arbitrum or whatever your favorite, non-Ethereum EVM network is, it can be really complicated. Most users don't know what the heck custom RPC is, right? So just like adding other networks has been really difficult for a lot of users. And I think has also been like a huge reason why we haven't seen more folks go to L2s earlier. That seems to be changing now, but I think it's like a huge friction point. So one of the early, and honestly, it's small, but it's made a huge impact, tweaks that we made is this. There's a drop-down menu in the top left corner of Tally that says Ethereum, Polygon, Optimism, Arbitrum. And as we continue to add a ton more networks, they're all going to be super easy to get to right there from the top left corner. Sounds small, but honestly, this is a huge pain point for other users. Another it maybe sounds prosaic, it maybe sounds boring, but like your ledger, it's already kind of involved to connect a hardware wallet to your browser wallet. It's already kind of complicated. It's already kind of scary. We know this hasn't worked well enough with like almost any other browser wallet before. So this is something we spent maybe 3 months of heads down engineering effort, kind of like rebuilding from scratch. So I would say network switching and like using your ledger. I don't know. I know maybe these sound like too in the weeds, but these were two just like existential user complaints that we kept hearing about when we first started work on this wallet that we were the most focused on. I think the other thing also just to zoom out is like we have what I would say is just like it's going to take a few years, I think, to change it, but we have like a pretty broken paradigm in Web3 in general of like accounts, addresses, and networks, right? I mean, like in what universe does this make sense? We know the number of chains and networks is going to increase exponentially. We know users have different wallets. So why are we asking the users to think in terms of different networks and different accounts? You care how much money you have in total. So this is another kind of like mental model that we've been thinking about in general. Yeah.
I personally think that one of the biggest problems in the space is we expect too much from the user. And we'll go to you, Matt, on this point. Like, what are your thoughts on, obviously, Michael started touching upon these topics, like, having to sign in, looking at the smart contract, like understanding all these things. How much should the user know, first of all, today, and second of all, in the future? Because those are two different questions, right?
So unfortunately today, should is a strong word. I don't know that I'll say should, but Unfortunately, today, if you are a user of Web3 and you do not want to lose your funds, you need to be comfortable going into Etherscan, researching contracts. You need to know, am I interacting with the contract that the dApp says that I'm interacting with? You need to understand which dApp am I connected to in the wallet. You need to understand what a recovery phrase is. You need to understand the difference between a recovery phrase and a private key. And that's just to avoid getting your ape stolen or whatever the latest NFT is, right? I mean, I think that that's like beyond unacceptable in terms of mainstream usage. When there's a bull run and everyone is making money, and you know you're talking like your neighbor is asking you about your random token picks or whatever. Okay, people will jump through hoops to get in on gambling. But when you're actually trying to solve people's problems day to day, you can't really ask them. I mean, I don't know the last time you guys have started a new MetaMask, like just like a new one from scratch. But my favorite bit of their onboarding is it actually suggests that you memorize your 12-word phrase. So if you can imagine like introducing a friend of yours to Web3, and then the first thing that they're presented in their onboarding is, oh yeah, I think it says, consider putting this in a safe or memorizing it. Like, no, please memorize your recovery phrase that could lose all of your money if you forget it. Like, that's horrendous. That's a terrible idea, right? So going forward, how I'd like the experience to look, I think Michael's really focusing on like, what are we doing today? But I'll jump a little bit further about what we want to do, which is like recovery phrases are a huge problem. This idea of addresses without names is a huge problem. ENS helps, but ENS is not by itself a full solution. The fact that you have to remember whether or not you've used a chain or a particular dApp. So if you've messed around a lot, you'll know that like it's easy to actually lose an NFT or lose tokens because you just forgot that you put them into a project. But you can hit withdraw at any time, but you just don't even remember. So it's like having a safety deposit box in Canada and you live in Mexico. You just forget about it and you don't,
I think it's a reminder for anyone or for the audience, like remember different wallets you have, then go check them right away.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of what you're starting to see us do in Tally on that side is to bring in some of the, not all of, but some of the things you've seen on like a Zapper or a Zerion and bring it in a little bit more native to the wallet. Similarly, that's why we have an NFT portfolio, because you shouldn't just forget about the things that you own, especially when all of those things are on chain and the wallet can do it for you, right? If you think about your possessions in your home, you can set something down and you can walk away and you can forget about it and you're going to come back and you'll find it because you remember kind of like the shape of your house, you know that you own it and you know that you didn't put it some random place. But if you do the same thing in Web3, it's like, well, I don't know, is crypto coven still a thing? And I took a loan out against my witch, like, yeah. So I think that all needs to be a lot easier too.
No, definitely. And going back also, Michael, on the topic of kind of user experience, there's one thing, I'll let the audience decide for themselves, but personally, when you go on the website of Talio, it is very user friendly. And you also have that, I wouldn't say gamification aspect because there's not like games, but it's very like friendly in terms of, kind of Web3 identity and almost feeling at home in a way. How did you decide on the identity of Tally Ho, Michael, and in general, like the overall experience, right? Because if we take the normal journey of a crypto user, obviously everyone's different. You'll probably start by a centralized exchange. And it's only after doing a couple transactions or buying a few tokens that you'll learn about probably MetaMask or another wallet. So what was your approach? And I say obviously Michael, but I'm talking also overall to the whole Talio team. How you decided to build this way.
So the idea of thinking about the dog was, the fox and the hound. There was a little bit of playfulness there. So that's where the dog came from. I think there was also a sense of like when you're making a brand, you don't want to have it totally fit in. So a really easy, obvious thing for us to do would have been to have this kind of, vaporwave aesthetic, but that didn't feel like true to the team. Like, honestly, we have a lot of dog lovers and like outdoor nature lovers on the team. And we're like, we're not seeing any brands that have this feeling at all. It doesn't quite fit. It felt right. Plus there was the fun play on the Fox and the Hound. So I think it just kind of like came naturally out of like the team and our personalities, to be perfectly honest. But we felt like there was like a naturalist element that just like wasn't represented in the ecosystem at all. I think we've been fortunate that like some of the like regen eco-friendly stuff in the community has started to like pick up like meme value. Like I think that's been good for us, I guess. Yeah, just really quickly, it's funny you mentioned the like average user journey from Exchange to MetaMask. What we'd like to do is really target users who are, or like really make a friendly space for users who are ready to jump into the world of like dApps and self-custody. And they're like, okay, they've been on Coinbase or they've been on Gemini or they've been on whatever, and they're ready to like kind of make that leap. We'd like to be the most like, Ethereum values aligned, cozy, warm place for you to take that first step, which we know can be a little bit nerve wracking. So this is an idea that we just come back to again and again and again, is like, how can we create a place that feels Web3 native that's also super cozy? So it's awesome to hear that some of that's coming through.
I'll go a bit further regarding kind of building the open web. I wanted to hear both of your thoughts, starting with Matt and then Michael, on how you've interacted with Gitcoin. Obviously, Gitcoin is a reference when it comes to funding and building the open web. So how has been the journey with Gitcoin? How have you interacted basically with Gitcoin?
Yeah, so the funny thing about Gitcoin, and actually it's going to sound like a letdown, but I actually think it's what's so strong, is that we haven't interacted with Gitcoin. So we didn't put up our first Gitcoin grant. We didn't put that was Unstoppable Domains, I believe. We didn't put up our current Gitcoin recipient that gets funded in funding rounds. The community did that. So they decided, hey, this is cool. We want to actually solicit donations for development here. And we're like, well, thanks. Go for it. We can't stop you. Go for it. So what we did was we made sure that there was a community multi-sig. We helped people like get together, signers who were comfortable with Gnosis and stuff like that. But we haven't really pushed it very much. But after the first round that we went through, we were sort of stunned by how many people got involved. And so since then, what we've done with Gitcoin, it's been less about like soliciting funds for ourselves, which like, again, we're not taking Gitcoin funds. The dev team is not. They're all going to the community multi-sig for the community to decide what to do with it. But what we have done is we've started realizing that we can kind of help promote Gitcoin as a way to sort of like demonstrate pro-social behavior, as a way to help build. And what I hope, and I'll let Michael talk more about this here, is that we'll also see it as a mechanism for funding future Tally features.
Yeah, I think before Michael bounces back on what you just said, is that it's true. Gitcoin does, I mean, that's my personal point of view, but I think a lot would agree so much for the community, the Web3 community. And there's always kind of this discussion around like, what can those that were helped by Gitcoin do back, so you have a virtuous cycle kind of like sustainable over time, because that's one of the things that Gitcoin is very successful, is making sustainable projects and kind of creating that loop, right? So what are your thoughts on, Gitcoin overall, Michael?
Definitely a big fan. I think they've done a great job also just like shaping and directing the conversation, done a good job driving the just like overall public goods meme in the space, which is, I don't mean meme trivially, but I mean, this is like an idea that's important to a lot of people that I think is crystallized like a more nebulous kind of like sentiment and area of concern around something that's, a bit more actionable.
Sorry, I really didn't want to interrupt you, but I think a good talking point on this is actually Kevin Owoki, one of the co-founders of Gitcoin. And going back to Tallyho and public goods, he said, and I quote, "We're excited to see Tallyho's leadership make public goods funding a top priority from their DAO's inception."
This is amazing. You've added even more runway. So yeah, so I think what Kevin's referring to there is we had an announcement and we're in conversation with the Gitcoin team about working with them on an aqueduct. An aqueduct is basically a funding mechanism that you can bake into a project or a product to make sure that a certain amount of revenue effectively flows into like a QF funding vehicle, right? So like, QF and public goods funding will be kind of like baked into your product from the inception. Now, the aqueduct, I think Gitcoin and I believe it was Dave White, a researcher at Paradigm, did some work on it. Was originally meant to be around like just flows of revenue. What we are proposing to do, though obviously it'll be up to the DAO how all this gets hammered out, is to basically make sure that 2.5% of the overall token supply for Tallyho after the fair launch goes straight into Gitcoin aqueducts. So basically there's going to be pretty much a nonstop spigot post token launch going straight into Gitcoin ecosystem rounds for Tallyho and maybe for the broader ecosystem too. So again, this is all subject to approval by the DAO and it's post fair launch. I won't go too far into it beyond that, but it's I think that's probably what Kevin's might be referring to. And I mean, Gitcoin, the whole team has been amazing to partner with, thinking through all this stuff.
I mean, first of all, thank you, because you definitely like added the needed details regarding
Sure.
kind of relationship or the how you're interacting with Gitcoin. I want to know a bit more. Maybe you can go with you, Matt, on what is the roadmap of Talio. You touched,
Sure.
you started discussing a bit about it, but like, where do you want to be next year? And more than the roadmap, actually, that will be the next question for you, Michael, is how do you want users or just general Web3 users to think of Talio? Like, what should be the first 2-3 things that come to their mind when they think of Talio?
Yeah, as far as the roadmap, what you guys are going to see is a pretty significant launch on Arbitrum. We've just soft rolled out that chain recently, and I know a lot of people might be like, "Well, what does it matter? You're a wallet, just launch on all the chains." But each chain we launch custom swaps, NFT features that are specific to the chain, and we're just sort of like slowly growing rather than launching all the chains and then doing a very poor job. So I think you're going to see some of that. Some other things to look out for, though we haven't made this public yet, so I don't want to commit too hard, is earlier we were talking about signing security, and we expect to have a pretty cool announcement around that not too long. But really, Michael owns the roadmap, so I'll let him go into some more detail.
Yeah, we got some awesome security stuff coming down the pipeline. We're gonna have a lot more networks. I guess the only other thing I'd add onto that is no firm plans around this, but I think account abstraction generally in Ethereum is like really interesting. And I'm hopeful maybe next year is the year where more users start to move away from seed phrases. That would be pretty darn cool. Though it could take a little bit longer, but
if you move from seed phrases, like what would be the kind of alternative, the mainstream?
Yeah, so there are a lot of ideas being batted around, but essentially you would have something, I mean, credit where credit's due, similar to what Argent's put together. Not exactly like that, but
yeah, the cool thing about that is you don't actually need smart contracts to do it. So we know that we want to have social account recovery, and if you guys are familiar with Thesis with its work, you'll also know that we've done quite a bit with Threshold ECDSA. So we have a team to do MPC as well. So I think what we're trying to figure out is like, the problem isn't the tech. The problem is what do we really want users to experience here? When we say recovery phrases are bad, like, okay, but how can we make this work that still keeps the user in control? So that's a conversation we're having right now.
I think also one of the things is you want the user to be, first of all, in control, and also to feel that it's safe. And I think obviously it's very complicated, because you would rather your funds be safe, even if it's complicated, than, it's super simple, but you come back and the next time you lost half of your tokens for who knows what reason, right?
Exactly.
Totally. But like sort of features and specific things that we're interested in on the technical side aside, I think like expect Talio to do all the things that your other wallets do, plus a few new fancy tricks. But the bigger, I think the more important thing is like, what do we want people to think about with the wallet? I would say like we'll be successful, or this project will be successful if people think like, oh yeah, that's our wallet. That's my wallet. And if they don't think of themselves as a user, but as a owner and as a stakeholder, that's really what we're trying to get to, is not that like, we're not trying to create an awesome wallet and give it to people. We want people to feel like, yeah, this is mine. I own it. I help govern it. I help co-create it. That's really what we're trying to shift to.
What are you excited about in the space outside of security, which is already a very important topic that we touched upon? Could be anything from DeFi, gaming, NFTs, creative economy, decentralized entities. What are you looking forward to in the space? What are you excited about or worried about, actually?
The thing I'm starting to think about the most is what is the intersection of crypto and Web3 and AI going to look like over the next 2 or 3 years? So a lot of my friends are totally addicted to Stable Diffusion or Dolly. We're going to start to see more and more I think disruptive AI products, and like how, what's the intersection as it were, AI? Yeah.
Are you familiar with Web3 projects that are working on that topic, or is it mostly Web2 right now?
It's mostly Web2. I haven't actually seen that much stuff in the AI space in Web3. I'd love, I don't know, Jordan or Matt, if you guys have seen anything that's blowing your socks off. Matt, we've never actually talked about this too much.
Yeah, I mean, what I love and hate about this topic is that you're taking, so the way, like, I'll say machine learning rather than AI, just to be like really specific. So the way that you look at ML, it's a centralizing force often, because the people that have the most data can build the best models. And then in our space, we're pulling in the opposite direction. So in some ways, they're almost polar opposites. So if someone can just present me an elegant combination of the two, I'm just going to be thrilled. I'm also like the tech nerd in me. I'm really interested in federated machine learning. I think that there's like a nice way to solve some of these issues. Like, can we learn locally and then still share our outcomes without giving away our privacy? So I think there's a lot there. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about more, obviously. But
yeah, I mean, obviously that could be a completely new discussion, so we don't have that much time. But I'd be very curious, Matt, since you obviously have a technical background. What are your thoughts on graphs in Web3 of creating users, trying to understand them? There's also a lot of businesses with like kind of data providers, data analysis for hedge funds. So what are not an easy question, but just your overall thoughts on the concept of graphs in Web3. There's different types of graphs. What are you excited about or curious about?
Yeah, so I guess it's worth dropping that I did a lot of early work on graph databases earlier in my career. So I think about the world this way a lot. I think if you spend a lot of time thinking about lens and this idea of social graph composability, there's a lot there, but it feels like a lot of the graph stuff is also in conflict with our desire. Like, crypto is a coordinating force, which means that you want graphs and you want to see like global data and you want to come up with like optimal answers. But then we also have this desire to keep greater privacy and to not have built like what's essentially a surveillance cage for ourselves, right? And so I guess I have mixed feelings about this. On the tech side, it's very easy for startups to just say, I'm going to be the data dog of Web3, or I'm going to be the whatever. And they just start naming random data companies and saying, but of Web3. But I actually think that the ones who are doing the hard work and the ones who deserve our support, and hopefully who also deserve funding, are the ones who are trying to resolve those key issues where they are trying to start with local first data. And that doesn't actually mean social graph is always going to be public. What it'll often mean is part of the social graph will be public, part of it will be private. Both should be portable. So anyway, so that's kind of how I look at it when you're thinking about social. Obviously, you can apply that same idea to a million other places where data is important.
No, it's a very good teaser on that topic. And also going back, I guess, to the topic of Michael, like, it's true. It's a very open discussion regarding like, not only machine learning, but like artificial intelligence. I think also augmented reality can be a very interesting topic in the years to come. Might be probably, and that's only my personal opinion, maybe easier to adopt in the general sense than the metaverse as a concept for the general population. Because so what are your overall thoughts, Michael, on like the metaverse, user interactions, and also going back to Tallyho, like how can a wallet kind of be part of all this?
Well, yeah, I mean, ideally we build a keyring and just like some core key manager tech that can be used across a variety of make the web weird again. I mean, we can have ideally we like the core of Tally, like right now we're focused on browser extension. We're going to have a mobile wallet relatively soon, but if we play our cards right and which we've continued to do to date, and make like just really solid key management code, that should be able to live on in a ton of different form factors. I don't know what's going to happen with the metaverse. I think it's like been a really smart pivot from Facebook, to be honest, because they know that what their revenue centers now like it's not going to, 5 years from now, they're not going to be anywhere close to what we're going to see. I think already in the last quarter with their Q3 earnings, we saw that. Anyway, putting that aside, I don't know. I'm very curious to see what happens with the metaverse stuff. Matt knows this. I'm more of like a brain machine interface guy. It feels like all the AR, VR stuff is, there's not a happy medium really. I'm interested to see what happens with Apple's AR and VR products. I don't think anyone's got the form factor right. I mean, this is the issue with Google Glass, right? Like a solid product, but like, guys, this is a fashion accessory and it looks terrible. Right. So until we get that, until we get
one of my undergrad professors, one of my favorite professors led the project, that's Starner. And he used to walk around before glass was a thing. He had his own heads-up display. He had a QWERTY keyboard that he kept in his pocket, and he would keep notes on all of his students. But it doesn't, when you try to do it at scale, it looks funny.
Yeah, but I think we have seen, so I think Snap actually did a good job with their lenses a while ago. Facebook, Meta has their Ray-Ban things. I think it'll be interesting to see if they're able to solve that form factor. And also like we do have social norms around like not recording people, right? When they don't know they're being recorded. Those seem to be changing, but like those are things that I would watch around AR. VR, I think we just need to get the weight of the headsets down But yeah, I mean, I don't know, over the next 10 or 20
Those are really
years.
great kind of final thoughts. Obviously, I feel
Yeah,
like
totally.
we reopened like 3 debates, completely different.
I guess I just want to drop a quick one, which is like,
Yeah, go for
I
it.
don't know if AR or VR is ever going to take off. I've been hearing that it's going to for a long time. I've been involved with some projects. I haven't seen it happen yet. But I do want to say, like, let's make the web weird. Like, whatever our next thing is, please, God, let's not just do the Zuckerberg version, you know? And I think that that's something that we can all decide with our choice of products and where we spend our money is we've all been lobsters in the lobster trap of Facebook. Like, let's do something different next time.
So like, why does Web3 matter? Yeah, it matters that you own your tokens, but the further we step into the metaverse, or to the extent that you have a device that's plugging your brain directly into the cloud, you really want to own your own thoughts, right? And so like, the further we step into this sort of, I don't know, techno-capital singularity, like the more our identity and ourselves are in digital networks, it's really important to create the norms of like actual ownership now. It's one thing to not own your Facebook content. It's another to like not own your thoughts and your feelings.
Yeah.
And that's literally what we might be looking at if we don't.
I mean, what
some
you
of this
just
stuff
said
right.
is the like norms of ownership. Like that's literally like a whole other debate, but very interesting in terms of, you know, like what you should own in what context, who owns data, information, identity.
Totally.
If you had any like really any closing thoughts or recommendations, something that inspired you recently, or that I mean, you already said that you're looking forward to, but like, yeah, just any final thoughts, basically. Each one of you, we'll start with Matt.
If you're looking to join a new economy that's not primarily backed by existing power structures, I suggest you work with a non-corporate Web3 wallet. So we would love to have you as users and part of the community at tallyho.org. Please check out the wallet. I think it's ready to replace MetaMask today. And that can be your one good thing. You took out your recycling and you downloaded Tallyho. How about it, Michael?
Come join us, tallyho.org. Find how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Perfect. Well, so all the links of Tallyho will be in the descriptions. Obviously, you can find the documentation on their website, and we invite the audience and listeners to go check them out. And as for us, I mean, well, first of all, thank you so much, Matt and Michael, for being part of today's forum. And yeah, as for us, if you want to get more involved in our community, make sure to follow us on our social platforms. So Twitter is NEWFORUM_NCO. Don't forget to share, like, or subscribe. And yeah, like can go a long way. And have a great day, everyone.
All right. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.